3, 2, 1.
Done with the mines.
You have to see it
It's
from
not.
different
It's
angles.
not a matter of them sitting there and saying, "Yeah, we put animals in the land. We
We're
did
not
this.
blind.
We did
We,
that."
like,
We're
have
not
eyes.
blind.
We
We
observe
know what
it
goes
ourselves.
on.
Hi, I'm Artie. That's me, over there on the left. And that's Ryan, Gail, Vince, and Martha.
I'm not saying that they're bad.
We all go to Pine Tree Secondary in Coquitlam, BC. But it's not like we hang out together. So we were kind of surprised when the 5 of us were asked to be in a video about mining.
right away.
Some of us had studied it in class, but we weren't experts.
Of course, they're gonna.
We soon found out, though, that we all had opinions about it, especially about how we'd feel if a mine was going to open in our neighborhood.
That the dirt would bother you and the noise, you could hear it.
I know.
Yeah,
the
and
air,
also
the
it's
strangers
just
coming
like
in,
the landscaping even.
It's
like,
not.
It'd be so
like
ugly.
you look out your back door window,
It's not
sitting
pleasant
on
to
your
look
porch
at
for a
all.
nice
Yeah.
evening, and you'd be seeing this.
What
This
happens?
pit.
I'd
Yeah,
be happy because it would bring so much more money to Coquitlam.
If they put one like 20 kilometers away, that'd be fine. Like
Because
the town
you-
would be prospering and everything, and no
Yeah,
one uses
then
that land
we-
And
anyway.
besides,
so
the noise wouldn't bother anybody because you can't
too
hear it.
far
Also
away.
with the acid rock drainage, acid that's washed off the waste rock of the mine can get into streams and rivers and kill fish and animals, and it's a real hassle.
There's like government regulations they have to follow. They have to reclaim it a certain way before they can
If
even
they
start
didn't-
opening the mine.
If they
anyways.
hadn't have reclaimed mines properly in the past, then they wouldn't have mines in the future because people would be able to fight them, right?
What would we do without mining? It's not an option. And unless we want to go back to the Stone Age, there's no way we can get away completely from mining.
I want to know about what the mining company is doing about reclamation, and I want to know if they really care about what they're doing.
A lot of times, I'm sure they could just be putting on an act. I want to know if they actually look into it, if they actually research.
I guess you'd have to ask them.
Where would you go to find that out?
The big time guys, the executive.
We did it! We got in to meet one of the senior guys at Teck Corporation, one of Canada's largest mining companies. Mike Lipkavich was expecting us, but I'm not sure he was expecting all the questions.
How do you know in the head office that everything that needs to be done is being done correctly and properly?
Every 3 months, there's a senior management meeting that includes people out of head office, and we will review all of the environmental events for the previous 3 months. There is an inspection at the site on a regular basis, an environmental inspection, which includes employees, not just management staff. We go out and we hire an independent external consultant to go to a property periodically and audit that property to make sure the systems and procedures are in place. The fact that something is not a regulation doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. So you do the things that are right.
What responsibilities do Canadian companies have around the world for mining?
All major Canadian companies have made a commitment to use Canadian technology around the world, regardless of where they're mining, because that's a moral obligation we have. And the other reason we do it is that on the longer term, if we didn't do it, the legislation within the other country will change, and then it's much more expensive to go back and correct your mistakes than it is to do it properly the first time around.
What responsibility does the mining company have towards the community talking about environmental issues?
Well, certainly there's a direct responsibility to the community for the environment, but there's a broader picture. The company has a responsibility to the environment for all the people in Canada, not just the people that live in that area.
Do you think that the government's environmental legislation is too strict?
I don't believe it's too strict. I think if there is a criticism, it's the length of time that it takes to go through the process. There's a very high standard in British Columbia. It's a standard that's recognized around the world. And I frankly think that the government does a pretty good job of maintaining a good overview of what's going on to protect the environment, to make sure that companies comply with the regulations. It really doesn't matter what I say. What matters is what you believe. And the only way that you can confirm what was said here, to satisfy yourself where the truth really lies, is for you to see some operations, not just one, but go to a number of mine sites. Look at what the mining companies are doing. And I think the picture you will get may be very different from the picture that you had, say, before you started your investigation.
We took Mike's advice and ended up in the Rockies at the Fording River Mine, a surface coal mine that's been in operation since 1971. Biologist Billy O'Brien has been on the reclamation team here for over 17 years. She showed us the lath house, where the tree planting process begins.
We grow about 40,000 conifer seedlings every year for a reclamation. We grow them in the greenhouse, which you see up top of the hill there, and we move them down here at the end of June. When we plant these seedlings, we put a little fertilizer tablet in with them, and then 2 years after the trees have been planted, we go in and we interseed with a legume. That flowering one, that fixes the nitrogen into the soil, and the tree will use that as a nutrient.
About 90% of these young trees survive.
Within 5 years or so, you won't even believe that this was a waste dump.
This is incredibly difficult.
How much do you get paid again to do this?
Billy showed Vince how they monitor the dust in the air. Apparently, dust is a problem at almost any mine, but they've come up with some cool ways to control it. The one we liked best was the latex sprayer. The coal that goes into each train car for shipment is coated with a solution that forms a crust. That way the coal dust won't fly into the air as it travels to the coast. Martha put on some designer boots.
These are like double my size.
To do a water quality check. Water on the site has to meet government standards for, among other things, chemical content and pH, clarity, and the amount of solid particles floating around in it.
At one time, this stream wasn't as wide, or it didn't have any vegetation. It was just a little trickle running through gravel.
It did seem that Billy genuinely cared about the animals that live here.
We have, at times, herds of 200 elk here on this mine site, and the wildlife love it. It has a high component of alfalfa.
No shortage of food here all summer, but in the winter it's a different story. Snowfall is heavy here, and the grasses and plants get covered up. That's why these woody plants are up here with protectors to shield them. They face south, exposed to the sun and the wind, so they're more likely to be free of snow for the hungry elk. Well, that was a good start, but were we ever tired? It must be the mountain air. And we still had one more appointment before we could call it quits. We wanted to know what a remote mining community was like. And you can't get much more remote than the wilderness capital of BC. Elkford's about a half-hour drive from the Fording River Mine. It has a population of about 4,000 people. And we were here to meet two of them, Rebecca Robinson and Jessica Ash.
So what do you guys do around here for fun?
Play volleyball, basketball, lots of sports.
Where do you guys go hiking?
There are a lot of trails.
Yeah.
Trees. Yeah. Like Josephine Falls.
It's so pretty out here. It's so different though from where we come from, because where we live there's just buildings everywhere. There's hardly any.
I know,
It must be nice to be around a lot of
And does it get too quiet out here?
Yeah.
It's really nice out
Yeah,
here.
it's peaceful.
I
Do you find
guess-
it really loud when you come to like the city? Like if you guys have like Vancouver and stuff?
Yeah, it's really loud.
You don't.
It's
I
like
bet you guys don't
exciting.
like it out there either.
Well, you gotta lock your doors and stuff like that.
You guys don't lock your doors out here?
I was beginning to think that I could be happy living in a mining town like this, until I asked the important question.
Where's the mall that you guys were talking about?
Back.
Right there. Our mall?
That's
We'll let you imagine what the mall looks like. After all, in a town of 4,000 people, you can't really expect a mega mall. Next stop, the Line Creek Mine. Another surface coal mine not far from Fording River, and definitely still in the Rockies.
Yep, on the stream.
We started our tour at the settling pond, a system used by many mines to keep their water clean.
And those flows also determine.
Water flowing through the mine sites can pick up sediment. The faster it flows, the longer these particles stay in suspension.
It's simple gravity. When you put it into a pond system and you slow it down, the sediment settles down out of the water, settles to the bottom of the pond, and the water travels down through the settling pond system.
We also noticed a conveyor belt running right beside the road. But how could you miss it? It's over 10 kilometers long. The belt is a recent addition to Line Creek's operation and is designed to reduce the fleet of haul trucks. It costs the company a lot of money, but it's energy efficient. It reduces air, land, and noise pollution. And by cutting down on heavy traffic, it makes the mine site a safer place for humans and animals. Speaking of animals, we moved to higher ground in the hopes of seeing more. And we weren't disappointed. These bighorn sheep spend their summers here on reclaimed land. Bighorns eat grasses and sedges, so around here these guys had it made. Not surprising, since these slopes were reclaimed especially with them in mind.
The objective of the reclamation was to put habitat back, to put it in a usable fashion for the animals that were here beforehand. Bighorn sheep need vegetation to survive. They also need escape terrain, and they need rock bluffs so they can scan their surroundings to keep their eyes for predators.
The bluffs are also a good place for the rams to figure out who's boss. Boy, were we ever getting around. Now we were looking down on Strathcona Provincial Park on Vancouver Island. The park is huge, about 200,000 hectares. We were here because the province has allowed about 3,000 of those hectares to be mined, presently by Westmin Resources Limited. Here at Myra Falls, mining's been going on for about 30 years, mostly for copper and zinc. Mining is done underground, so only about 200 hectares have been disturbed on the surface. And because it's in a provincial park, they have to be really careful about how they treat the land. When they do their exploratory drilling, miners and equipment are usually transported up the mountainside by helicopter. The construction of temporary helipads is a lot easier on the environment than road building. In fact, some of the mining roads that they once used are now in the process of being reclaimed. They also supply their own power, much of it from this hydroelectric dam built by the company. Back on land, we asked about one of our major concerns.
There's a lot of orange staining on the rocks here. How bad is the acid rock drainage problem?
It is a natural problem, but we have compounded it by bringing it to surface and exposing it.
Exposed rocks that contain sulfide minerals generate acid when they come in contact with water and air. Waterways that make contact with the rocks become acidic and then pick up metals like zinc and iron that compromise their quality even further. some mines divert their streams so that they don't come in contact with the waste rock. They may also collect the water passing through the site and pump it to a treatment plant where acidic water is neutralized with a lime solution and metals are allowed to settle out.
We, while we are operating the site, can fairly, in a straightforward manner, treat that acid rock drainage.
But what about when the mine closes? Controlling acid rock drainage over the long term may end up being one of mining's biggest challenges. It certainly seems to be a high priority. Steve told us that we were standing on a recent experiment.
This is a shotcrete cover. It's basically it's a cement mixture that was applied to an area here on top of this waste rock dump as a method of sealing off air and water penetrating into that waste rock, which is what causes the acid rock drainage. Anything over time moves, and the shotcrete, as soon as it cracks, becomes ineffective.
Yeah, you can see the crack.
We were learning that modern mining involves research and testing. Although the shotcrete did not work at this site, there are effective methods that do work. In fact, the law requires Canadian mines to control acid drainage indefinitely until acceptable permanent solutions are found. My thoughts kept on turning to the sites we'd already visited and how each one stood out in its own way. I guess every mine has their challenges to deal with. But what does this have to do with fishing? Well, actually, quite a bit, since our fishing hole sits right in the middle of another mine that is most definitely unique. The Highland Valley Copper Mine near Kamloops is gigantic. There's some 6,500 hectares of land disturbed here to date. That's a lot of land to reclaim, especially when it's so dry here in the summer that it's hard to get things to grow. They've tried spraying an oil-based liquid on the topsoil to keep it from blowing away. That's helped a little. But to make things really grow here, biosolids are the answer, according to Bob Hamaguchi.
So that's one of the advantages of using biosolids. It holds the moisture. Okay.
So all right here is all biosolids?
Yeah, this is all biosolids in the field.
What is biosolids?
Biosolids is just a solid waste from sewage plants.
So in other words,
is it from like animals or
from human?
Yeah, right.
Human waste.
That's right.
Ew.
Why do you?
This is really not. It's just a fertilizer, really. When you break it down into ingredients, it's got a lot of nitrogen, okay, which the plants all need, and the microorganism to create the soil.
Is this like a biosolid right
Yep.
there? Oh, wow.
So how many years do you have to study for to become a biosolid engineer?
Well, I don't know if there's such a thing, but...
What a great way to make use of sewage. But I think we'll pass on becoming biosolid engineers. Now fishing, that's a different matter. And Bob was an excellent teacher, since fishing is his passion, especially for the rainbow trout that he's introduced here in Trojan Pond.
When I first stocked the lake back in 1991, and within 3 years the fish were up to about 5 pounds, and that's only because there was a limited number of fish and there was lots of food, so they grew really fast.
But we haven't told you the most amazing thing yet. Until the late 1980s, Trojan Pond was an active part of the mine. It was a disposal compound for the tailings, which are the sandy waste particles produced at the mine during the grinding and separating process. A few years after they stopped pumping tailings into Trojan Pond, Bob noticed that the natural aquatic life was making a comeback, so he tried the experiment of introducing the rainbow trout. Things are going so well that every year they hold a big fishing derby. I think I'm ready to grab first prize. Then again, maybe not. Reclamation goes on a long time after mining. That's what we were beginning to understand here at the Afton Mine. We also learned that there's more than one way to reclaim a tailings pond.
This will be a wetland. It won't be a fishery lake. So we'll have cattails and rushes and duckweed. And this will mainly be designed for wildlife, for wildfowl.
What are the advantages of making this into a wetland?
Well, as the ducks fly through the area, this is a resting area for them. It'll also provide feed when we have the vegetation established here. Also, we'll have some indigenous fowl here, such as loons and the diving ducks.
Gary may need to add a little vegetation on the pond's bottom as well, like they have at other mines.
Basically, what we have to do is to get it started and then get out of the way, because nature will reclaim all of this. We just have to help her out a little bit.
And
then
give it a head start.
Yeah, that's right.
So where did Ryan and I get to? Well, actually, we were off touring the Afton mine site with Will, an excellent cowboy and guide. But we knew the others would have to have their turn in the saddle as well. Little did they know that they were trailblazing on a reclaimed waste dump.
In 1988, this mined rock pile was topped and seeded.
Why are all those different rocks placed there?
Well, it's a good perch for birds of prey and also smaller birds, but also it's good for marmot habitat. So what we're really concerned about here is not only planting seed and getting vegetation to grow, but creating habitat as well. Off to the side on the ridge, that area's just been covered with topping soil and dozed down. And then this fall we'll be coming in and seeding and fertilizing that slope. Part of the day-to-day operation.